Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Facebook and YouTube Live for Keith RN. My name is Maria Flores Harris, and I am the nurse consultant for Keith RN. If you're checking us out for the first time, this live stream is to support and serve the needs of nurse educators, to empower you with the practical strategies that you need to develop clinical judgment so students are better prepared for practice and licensure. Keith RN is a company that was founded by Keith Risher about 12 years ago, and the vision was to lead changes needed to reform nursing education and close the ongoing gap between how nursing is taught and how nursing is practiced. Our focus is on developing clinical judgment to improve practice readiness and ultimately to improve patient outcomes. So our mission is to transform nursing education one educator at a time and to prepare students for practice. So with that said, I would love to hear from our audience. And if you will, I would like to know who's with us live. So if you will just drop your first name and where you're from in the chat, I'd love to just kind of check out where our audience is from. I'm going to pull up the chat so that I can see, and please feel free to drop in your name and where you're from. And as you're doing that, I am just going to go through and tell you a few things about Keith RN. If you are interested in viewing some of our prior YouTube and Facebook Live events, you can go to our YouTube channel and subscribe to our channel. I have put that link on the screen for you. That's the YouTube channel, Think Like a Nurse. We also have a Facebook group, and this Facebook group is Teachers Transforming Nursing Education. If you are not a part of that Facebook group, I highly recommend it. It is a group of over 17,000 educators, and it is a support group for you. Ask a question, you will have people answering you, giving you advice, giving you tools, strategies. So I highly recommend that group. Also, I want to mention our how to develop clinical judgment workshop. We have one every month, and for June, our workshop is tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Eastern, and you can sign up for the free workshop at the link that you see on your screen. I highly recommend that as well. I also want to mention our new nurse educator course. This is an online course to help you develop clinical judgment. You can access part 1 of the course free, and it tells you all about really what the course is about. And if you are a member, you can access the full course for free. If you're not a member, there's an additional cost for part 2 and part 3, and you do get CEs for that course. Now, I mentioned members, and I just want to mention our all-inclusive membership. We do have a membership for individuals and for departments with hundreds of case studies, dozens of active learning templates and tools, and faculty development with CE. You can go to the link that you see on the screen to find out more about it. And let me just also say here that as the nurse education consultant for Keith RN, it is my job to take care of the members. So I am there to support our members. I do orientations, I provide curriculum mapping and integration, and best practices for the use of the Keith RN resources. So if you are a member and have a question, feel free to reach out to me. My email there on the screen. Or if you're not a member and you want to find out more, feel free to reach out to me. It's maria@keithrn.com. So a lot of housekeeping to get through, but we are basically done. I was just checking the chat. We have some people from Indiana, so welcome. Nice to see you guys from Indiana. Please feel free, again, if you joined a little bit late, to just put in your first name and where you're joining from. We'd like to know where our audience is from. With all of that said, I want to highlight our newsletter. Let me highlight one other thing first, and then we'll get to the newsletter and introduce our speaker. We have a new initiative at Keith RN, And we invite you to apply to be a guest on our Facebook Live events. So the events like we're having tonight. If you have research or strategies to develop clinical judgment or increase the practice readiness of your students, go to the link that you see on the screen there and submit an application. We want to highlight you, our fellow educators, and your accomplishments, because that is part of our mission at Keith RN. And then finally, I will say that we do have a newsletter. And this June, we put out a monthly newsletter. This is the link to the June newsletter with all of the events that are up and coming. But the topic of our June newsletter was transitioning to practice. And that is what our topic is about tonight. With that said, I want to put up our speakers graphic here. Our speaker tonight is Tenley Force, and I'm going to read her bio to you. But before I do that, I do want to give a special shout out to one of our special audience members, and that is Sheridan. Sheridan is Tenley's mom. I met Sheridan at the same time that I met Tenley. And let me just say that the light that I see shining in Tenley was inherited. So Sheridan, welcome. I know you're out there, and it's nice to know that you're out there. With that said, let me read Tenley's bio to you. Tenley is a registered nurse from Southern California. Her nursing background includes med-surg, respiratory, disaster response, public health, and nursing education. She is a current fellow at Duke Divinity School in the Theology, Medicine, and Culture Initiative. Tenley is a published author specializing in self-help for new nurses. Her book, New Nursing and the Art of Being Human, debuted in 2023. It is her passion to equip nurses with tools to maintain their holistic sense of well-being in the midst of such a demanding profession. Hi, Tenley. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me today.
We are excited to have you. I have been looking forward to this since I met you. So thank you for coming, agreeing to come and be our guest. So Tenley, I usually start these conversations with asking you to tell us about your journey into nursing and how you became a nurse and why you became a nurse. But I'm not going to do that because that's really a big part of what we're going to talk about tonight. So we're going to get to that. So instead, I'll just ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself. Just share what you would like to share.
Sure. Thank you so much. And thanks for having me again. Yes, that definitely my nursing journey was not linear. It's still very up and down. Definitely not kind of quote unquote your typical kind of pattern I think that a lot of nurses follow, but that's okay. I'm still here, and I just want to give a shout out to all the nurses out there who maybe they didn't do 2 years here and go up to management and do that like in trajectory. So shout out to all of you. Yes, a little bit about myself. Like I said, I am from Southern California, now currently residing in North Carolina for university. I have become a huge basketball fan to the point where I'm going to apply to be a basketball usher at Duke, Blue Devils. So that's a little bit about me and my current state. One of my favorite nursing jobs that I had was getting to be a clinical instructor. So I definitely have such a passion, kind of like Keith does, for new nurses transitioning into practice, and just wishing all of my baby nurses who are now so much more accomplished than me, and they're just so smart, and I just know that they're all going to be charge nurses in like 2 seconds flat. They're amazing. So I just have such a heart for that transition and that community as well, which is really reflected in my book. I think it's really my passion to, like you said, just lean into that and hopefully support them holistically and all the new nurses that I can holistically as they go along.
Absolutely. I love your passion, and it comes through, and that's what I love about you. So I do want to dive into your book. And I want to share one thing to begin with, and then we'll kind of really get it in depth about the book. But I found so much good stuff in this book. I've got so many highlights and markers, but this is on page 3 of the book. I mean, this is how this book just catches you. And on page 3, I'm just going to read a couple of sentences here. Tenley writes, I went into nursing thinking that I knew what it meant to love others, but in reality, it was nursing itself that truly taught me how to love. It taught me to love without judgment, to love amidst the difficult, and to love fiercely without wavering. All you need to know about me and how I view others is that loving my neighbor is the proverbial hill I choose to die on. I love that. And I do think that that's the heart of a nurse. What you wrote there, that's the heart of a nurse, or at least it should be the heart of a nurse. So I appreciate those words. And
Mm.
before we start really, I've got some things that I really want to dive into. But before I do that, I know everyone that's joining and everyone that's going to see this recorded maybe has not read the book. So tell us, just give us an overview of what this book is about.
Sure. So, New Nursing in the Art of Being Human is a project that I started around month 7 of my first year of being a new graduate nurse. At the time, I was really kind of grappling within myself, just feelings of inadequacy, feeling incompetent, feeling like I was burdening the team, all of these just like negative thoughts. And I really just began to think, I can't be the only one who feels this way. Like, I just can't. So I started to talk to trusted nurses around me. I feel very fortunate to be connected still with some of my nursing professors from undergraduate, with some of my nursing classmates. I feel very fortunate in that way. And if you're a nurse that has ever met me, I'm like, we're family. Like, like you're stuck with me now. Like, we're together. So so when I was kind of really struggling, I decided to reach out and ask for help because I really was kind of at the end of my rope. I didn't know what to do. And I was met by a resounding, I felt that way too when I was a new nurse. And whether I asked other new nurses around me, whether I asked experienced nurses, 20 plus years in the field, everybody remembers a time when they felt just so low and so alone. And so it was really when I recognized, oh my gosh, I'm not the only person that feels this way. I was like, you know what, we need to start talking about this a little bit more. And I started to do some research, looking at nurse researchers, particularly Marlene Kramer and Dr. Jody Boychuk-Dutcher. And they did landmark studies, Kramer in the 70s and Dutcher in like 2008, 2009. And in their research, talking to new grads were saying the same thing. Like, I feel so alone. I feel so incompetent. I feel all of these bad, negative things. And so I was like, wow. So like, not only was I not alone, amongst my peers, like my peers felt this way, but like the landmark studies about transition, nurse transition, like the nurses felt this way too. So writing has always been my passion. And so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna write a little bit more about this and investigate this more. And so new really took off. When I interviewed 25 new nurses to get that really raw perspective of people who were in the middle of that first year of nursing. They're still crying themselves to sleep every night, being like, how am I going to make it? Paired with 25 experienced nurses that I interviewed, that really was the resounding, like, you can do it. You will make it. We're going to help you. And so having all those 50 voices come together to bring a holistic picture of how we can take care of ourselves in the midst of new transitions, changes, jobs, and really that crucial first year that can be really hard as a new nurse.
It can be really hard. I think that's an understatement. I do want to ask of the audience, if I would love to know if you are a student or a recently graduated student, or a nurse that is, in your first year of transition. If you are, if you don't mind just kind of saying, yeah, that's me, or yeah, just identifying yourself in the chat. I would love to know if we have any new nurses, because I think this is going to really speak to you. While you're doing that, Tinley, I want to bring in the artwork for the book, because I will say that this is what caught my eye when I looked over to your table at the conference. And so I know now from reading the book and talking to you that there is a special meaning behind this artwork. So tell us a little bit about the artwork for the book.
Sure, I'd love to. So this was like a really serendipitous thing that happened when I met this artist. So this artist that did this work is actually based on a painting. He's predominantly a painter and then street artist based in Los Angeles. His name is Blacklight King. So you can look him up on Instagram, on his website. And a lot of his stuff, when you put a black light on it, glows in the dark. He's just phenomenal. A lot of his influences He's Mexican American, so, and he has some like Mayan influences in his artwork, just very beautiful. And I met him probably around month 6, month 7 of my new grad year, right before I kind of started dabbling with writing again. And he had recently been hospitalized himself for a lung issue. And working on a respiratory floor myself, like the lungs were always like in the back of my mind. And so getting to talk to him and meet him, and just like hearing a little bit about his experience. And he showed me some artwork that he had worked on during his hospitalization. And it was a hand-drawn sketch of lungs, and the lungs were like kind of like sick and sad and like bleeding, but he had these dragons coming out of them surrounding the lungs. And his whole statement through working on this piece again while he had been hospitalized was, this is painful, but like these dragons, I'm going to rise again, and I'm going to make something beautiful out of this painful situation. And then I got to talking to him a little bit more, and I told him, I used to love writing. I grew up writing all the time. I was crazy about it. Like that's how I would spend my free time. But since nursing school, like who has the time? And I really wanted to kind of pick up that hobby again to pour into myself. And so I told him that I wanted to write again, but I didn't know what I wanted to write. And I also was telling him about, I'm a new nurse and I'm really struggling and like this and this. And he was like, well, why don't you write about that and make something beautiful out of a painful situation? So that was like the literal instance when like the light bulb went off in my head. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I should write about that. And so once I really got the writing process going, I reached out to him and was like I don't know, like we met like happenstance. Would you like to talk? Would you like to work together, collaborate? And he was like, oh my gosh, I do remember you. Let's do it. And now it's like a lifelong friendship that I feel like I've created. And it just was like such a chance random encounter. And now it's just like birthed this really, really precious thing, especially to me, like I said, starting on a respiratory floor, just having this image of lungs. And now they're healthy lungs. You'll notice the lotus flower, like representing a lot of peace and healing and life. Yeah, so that's what the artwork means, and a little bit really, again, what the impetus was for me even starting to write about this topic.
I love that story, and I love the artwork, and it when you look at it, I mean, I feel like every piece of it is a symbol of something. It's not just heart and lungs. It does have the lotus flowers there, and you have the wings, and I just it's awesome. I love it, and it certainly catches your attention. So I appreciate you sharing that story. I
Yeah,
will
thank
take
you.
that down. And what I really want to do now is dive into this book. And so I'm going to read a little excerpt and we'll talk about it. And I'm just looking at the chat. We've got people from all over the country: Arkansas, Kansas, Kentucky. Of course, we have some from California, Florida. So thanks, guys. Thank you for joining. It's so cool to see people from all over the country. Okay, so I want to read this, Tenley, and then we will talk about it. It's basically a paragraph and a part of another, so not too long. I had a hard time. I had a hard time picking out what I wanted to read because there's so much that I want to read. But by the way, audience, I asked Tenley, is it okay for me to share this much? I'm like, I'm going to give away the whole book if you let me because I love it. These are Tenley's words. It doesn't matter if we are the best, the smartest, the quickest, or the sharpest nurse in the world. We will always be inadequate because we cannot possibly be everything to all of our patients. We cannot save them all, but we can come alongside them in the shadow of the mountain of disease so that they won't feel alone or small. We do not have to do it perfectly either. If the only thing that we can do is buy our patients more time, then we need to come alongside them and make that time count by showing up to work, working our hardest, and trying our best. In life, that is really all that you can do. No matter how much we want to fix a person or a situation, in reality, we won't always be able to do that. It was never about being perfect or providing perfect care. Instead, it is about loving, fighting for, and coming alongside complete strangers so that they do not have to go through the uncertainty of illness and death alone. You are making that limited time the patient has with you count. The nurse is not simply in the environment. The nurse is the environment. If we go into work thinking to ourselves, what can I do to provide a better environment for the people whom I am working with, instead of what can I do to not make mistakes, then we will be able to take some of the pressure off. So there's a lot there to unpack. I think the first part of this beautifully states what we do as nurses and how we should view our responsibilities as nurses, how we should view our responsibilities as humans, to be quite frank. Um, and you made an important point a little bit later where you said that nurses are not the dictators of life, but the stewards of life. So, talk a little bit more about that as it relates to what we just read.
Yeah, this is like a good reminder even for me. I'm like, "Oh yeah, like that's true." I'm getting ready to start actually a new nursing job, and so I'm like mentally preparing myself. So I'm like, "Oh, like I'm absorbing this like this too." This thank you for reading that. Yes, I think we're gonna talk about this a little later too, so I won't give away too many spoilers. And
Okay.
this is so funny because what you just read is from chapter 2, and I remember when I wrote chapter 2, I was like, "Should I be this intense, like, right out of the gate?" Because it's some really heavy content right in chapter 2, but I
Mhm.
think that, nurses the nurses that I know are so good about just, like, getting right to the heart of the issue and, like, we don't have time to mess around, so, like,
Right,
let's just get to the
right.
point, let's talk about the elephant in the room, like, let's just do this. Um, so I don't know if any of you guys are Grey's Anatomy fans. I actually had to stop a number of years ago because it was stressing me out too much. I was like stressed watching it. But one of the famous lines from the beginning of the show is "It's a beautiful day to save lives." And I remember, in nursing school, we'd always like say that to each other, like when we were going to clinicals and all this. And then, you know, you get out into the nursing field and you realize that there are some days genuinely where you do save someone's life. And I think that that is really beautiful and really powerful. But those days are a lot more infrequent than, your days
Right.
where you're like, do I like this job? Like I'm being yelled at a lot. Like I don't like I don't know. And so that's when I really started to think, it's sure, it's a beautiful day to save lives, maybe, but it's always a beautiful day in which we can love people. And so that was a big reframe that I had because I had all of these expectations of myself about, who I was supposed to be as a nurse, being this perfect clinician, this perfect person, which is like totally false, And I think having to navigate the idea of being imperfect in nursing where everything is so high stakes is very stressful, but I do believe it's doable. And I think one of the ways, like you were saying, is it's like when you show up to work, can I be that perfect person? No. Can I show up and try to love the people that I'm taking care of to the best of my abilities? Yes, I can do that. And when I don't know something, or when I feel like I'm lacking, or when I feel like I'm not enough, I have the rest of the team around me to be able to collaborate with. And I think I actually got the word enough tattooed on my arm. Um, and this is a little digressing, but I got it to remind me every time someone sees it, they're like, oh, to remind yourself that like you are enough. And I'm like, no, actually, it's to remind myself that I'm not enough. And that's okay. Because one person can't possibly do everything in this life. One person can't provide perfect 24/7 care to a patient. You have the oncoming nurse to pick up where you left off, and just really making peace, I think, with my own inadequacy. And I think that's when things really started to change for me, was when I was like, you know what, I am going to make peace with being okay with not being enough, because I'm just not. But the areas that I'm lacking, I'll ask for help. um, it is hard, I think, in nursing, because even I mentioned it in the book, like even the code team with all of their shared knowledge, resources, experience, like if death is coming to a patient, death is coming to a patient. And one of the nurses I interviewed, I think she was in like her second month when she told me this, but it also really shaped the way that I was thinking. She said, we try our hardest and we pray the rest of the way. And in nursing, that's really all that you can do. And if you've done that, I think that that's enough. So that was, I think, the main theme of chapter 2, which is called Small Love. So it's really about small acts of love, and I tell a story in it. Oh, now I'm giving away spoilers. But, I tell a story in it about how I was assigned to a very confused patient, like not oriented at all, and she screamed bloody murder the entire 12 hours I had her the first night. So then when I went in the second night to work, I was like, I don't want to do this again. Like, I know I'm going to have this patient again, and I don't want to take care of her. Like, I just don't want to. And, so I get my assignment. We're together again, and she slept for 2 hours, this time out of the 12. But just like, again, screaming, fighting the whole night. And I just remember thinking, like, I really don't like my job right now, and I'm really having a hard time loving this patient, but that's where my nurse heart kicked in. And something within me like stood up and was like, okay, but you are still her nurse, you still have to love this person. She's not oriented. And so I remember I have this like vision or visualization that's so clear in my mind of she had thrown up, and she had a G tube or an NG tube, and like it just was a whole mess. And I just remember cleaning vomit off of her face and just being like so humbled in that moment of like, nurses don't get to choose like who they love, really. Like, you have to love unconditionally, but also with boundaries. Also, I do want to say with boundaries, because I know I think historically nurses have been kind of taken advantage of, and I'm so excited to see like nurse advocacy happening right now. But anyway, so it was a very humbling experience of like what actual sacrificial love means.
And I think it's a great example of the fact that we don't have control of everything. I mean, not only do we not have control of life, but we don't have control of the patients that are living and what they're going through and how they're going to treat us. But that whole chapter was about the fact that we as nurses still show our patients compassion and love no matter what. And it is a powerful story. I remember that story. So I want to go on to another quote that you use throughout the book. And I think it's important to talk about this quote and in the context of exploration of feelings, because when we think about new nurses, all of us, I'm assuming, that are on this webinar are nurses. And I think we probably all have horror stories from our first year, and we remember what that felt like. And what Tenley's about to describe, we've probably all gone down this rabbit hole with her as well. But you say many times in the book, Tenley, I didn't go back and count it, but I know I read it several times. You repeat a quote that says, "It's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way." And so talk about what you talk about in the book when it comes to a healthy exploration of feelings versus what you call the crazy spiral.
Yeah. So this, it's not to be, sorry, it's okay to not be okay really stemmed from a lesson that I learned from, I was a resident advisor in undergrad. And so that came from my resident director. I remember him saying that to us a lot. And I'd never heard that before. And I was like, oh, what? Like, I just had no idea that was a possibility. And so that really changed my life. And so I've had chronic anxiety like ever since I can remember. And so I definitely remember times in which I was like, kind of standing at a ledge, kind of like a precipice. And like, there's just this like dark spiral, like, which I call the crazy spiral, like looming before me. And it's just being like, okay, am I going to jump into that? And am I going to let my anxiety sink me to a place where I can't get back out? And so it's been now a lot of years of me, knowing my own self and what I need to be able to process my anxiety in a way that I'm letting myself feel the feelings without going into a space where now I'm in a headspace where I can't get out, and I'm having panic attacks and, all of this kind of stuff. And so I definitely recommend, I talk to my nursing students about this too, is you have to have people in your life, safe community in your life. That was a huge theme of the nurses that I interviewed, was having safe people that you can talk to, that can really help you also stay out of the crazy spiral too, and remind you of what is good and true about you. Because I think when you're a new nurse, like I said, it's so easy to feel inadequate. And I remember one of the nurses I interviewed being like, don't let the nurse that you think you are talk to you like that. And so her big thing was having people in your life to be like, no, you are smart, you are competent. Needing help is not weakness. It's asking for help is truly bravery. And so just being okay with being vulnerable and letting people into that space. And I definitely think I was I would like run away from my feelings for years. So it was a slow process of like, I'm gonna let myself feel this little feeling of anxiety. We're gonna just test it out. And then once I feel like I'm going too far, then I'm gonna pull it back. And if I can't pull it back, I'm gonna have someone help me, like we'll go on a walk or something. So that kind of stuff of like letting yourself feel without letting yourself just be like like
Right,
take.
right.
Mhm.
Well, you say this in the book, and I think it's important to read this, especially today. You say that your feelings do not tell you true things about the world. Your feelings tell you true things about your heart. Our feelings and emotions are not adequate signals about the way things are outside of us. And I think that's a really important statement, like I said, especially for today, because there's so much out there now. You have the 24/7 media cycle, you have social media, and there's so much out there. um,
Mhm.
and yes, it can influence you, but what you're saying here is that your feelings are your feelings, and it's what's going on inside of you, and that's not necessarily what's going on out in the real world. And I think it's important that we take note of that, and we really say to ourselves, okay, maybe I'm doing some negative talk here, and that's just me, and I need to explore that, and basically call it what it is.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I really like that really stood out to me. So I appreciate you sharing that with us as
Yeah.
well. And I'm going to share this. This is what one of the nurses that you interviewed said. Um, well, actually, she quoted Miyazaki. I may be saying that wrong. When Miyazaki said, "A heart is a heavy burden," and the nurse said, "Having a heart means having the feelings that come with it." And I just
Mhm.
love that because a lot of times we as nurses we are told that we're the heart of nursing, and I think we are, but that comes with a heavy burden, because if you have a heart, then you feel
Mhm.
all of these feelings, right? So I love the piece on that. That remember that your feelings tell you true things about your heart, but not necessarily true things about the world.
Mhm.
Is there anything else you want to share about that, Tinley? Or
Yeah, I think that's definitely so true when you have anxiety. I have social anxiety, and like pretty much every interaction I have, I'm like, oh God, like did I mess that up? And it's like, well, no, like you didn't mess it up, like it's fine. So I think just noticing that, especially if you are someone with anxiety, to be like, okay, what is true here and what is not, and then again to have people in your life to help remind you again about what is good about you. And I love that Miyazaki quote. It's from a movie, Howl's Moving Castle, which is my favorite movie. I love it. So that's where that came from. And I think it's true. And even experienced nurses, I think, now I've had my license for 5 years and I've been practicing for a while. Just rechecking in on my heart, because you go into nursing with such a tender heart, and then you have to learn how to kind of defend it and protect it, because otherwise you won't survive if you're like crying about everything. But you have to recheck in with yourself, especially as you gain more experience, because I think becoming jaded happens faster than you think, and it's very sneaky. And so like I said, I'm starting a new job soon, and I'm kind of like, oh man, like I need to be more aware of this, because I know when I stepped out of inpatient the first time, like I was not a patient person. I was becoming a grouch, I was becoming unkind, I was becoming all of these things that I didn't like. And so now I'm just like, okay, a heart is a heavy burden, and I want to be a better steward of it in protecting myself in the ways that I need to be protected, but also giving my heart to my patients in the ways that I do need to give my heart to my patients. So kind of having that balance. And I think that's a lifelong thing we have to relearn
absolutely.
and relearn throughout our career.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I love that again. If this book is something that you share, talking to the audience, if this book is something that you're sharing with a new nurse, that's an important fact that they need to learn early, and will continue to learn. So let's talk about some more heavy stuff. We're going to talk about really what I think is the heaviest of stuff for
Mhm.
nurses, and that's in chapter 7. The title of chapter 7 is When It Is Actually Your Fault. You say you learned in your first year of nursing that making mistakes is not just a possibility, but an imminent reality. And when a nurse told you it is not a matter of if you make a mistake, it is a matter of when, that you actually felt relief.
Mm.
Explain that.
Yeah, I remember, that was one of my charge nurses from my first year as a nurse, and, night shift, like, we all get really close because 'cause we're there, like, all the craziest hours, and that was really freeing for me because I think before that, I felt like I had to really put on a front that, like, I can't make mistakes, I can't make mistakes, I won't make mistakes, I won't make mistakes, but that really, I think made me kind of, like, mask, I think, what was really happening inside of me, I guess, if that makes sense. Um, I think when he said that quote that you just read, I think it was like, "Oh, like, nurses do make mistakes. We are fallible because, of course, we're humans." One of the new nurses I interviewed for the book, she says, something along the lines of, "We're human beings trying to save other human beings." And, of course, just by, the nature of our finitude and fallibility, we are going to make mistakes. And like the other nurse said, you do your best you can, you pray the rest of the way. And so I think just hearing that, you are going to make mistakes. And I think the thing that defines you as a nurse is not if you make mistakes or not. And of course, you have to be safe, safe practice, very important. But what really defines you as a nurse is how you handle the mistakes after the fact. And so in nursing, you have to practice so much humility, and it's hard, but it's like practicing humility is like the number one, I think, number one skill for new nurses. You have to own up to it. You have to tell your team. You have to get help for your patient, especially if it's something that is critical. Yeah, and so just saying, "You know what? I was wrong. I did something wrong. This is the plan we need to implement to help the patient. This is the help that I need. Let's get the team in." And I think just having that heart of humility, I think about, like, everyone in the world, and I'm like, "Man, like, if we all just acted like that, like, I was wrong. Like, what can we do to fix it?" I think that there would just be a lot more healing, I think, in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that was a really powerful, statement to me. Of course, like, I still to this day am anxious about making mistakes because I think we all need to be on our toes when we are nurses. But like I said, it's more about what you do after the fact,
Absolutely.
that really shapes you. Mhm.
Absolutely. And I want to talk to the educators here about this next piece. It kind of ties into what we were just talking about. You say in chapter 5 that we are taught to be strong, but not how to be weak. And that one phrase really hit me.
Mhm.
And so again, I want to talk to you, educators in the audience, because this is where I say, we have that popular TV show that coined the phrase, I think it is beautiful day. I said good day, but today is a beautiful day to save lives. I've never heard anyone say today is a good day to end a life. But to a nurse, ending a life is just as real a possibility as saving a life. And so I'm asking you, educators, what do we do? Do we teach our students what they should do when they make a mistake, especially a mistake that causes the death of a person? Are we talking about this with our students? Are we telling them that making a mistake is imminent and that perfection is not the norm? Are we talking to them about, I'm just going to say it, the reality versus the fairy tale, practice versus education? To me, education is almost a fairy tale world because it's a perfect world and we do expect perfection. And then you get into reality when you get into practice and things look very different. So I would like to, I'm going to open it up for Tenley to expand on that. But I would also like for those of you that are in the room, I would love to hear your thoughts and your comments on that. I see that Chris Litton says this is powerful. Cassandra says, yes, practice versus education comes up almost weekly. Let me put this up. Cassandra says, practice versus education comes almost weekly in my course. Cassandra, do you mind to expand on that a little bit? What is it that comes up when it comes to practice versus education? What do you see? While Cassandra is maybe hopefully typing a little bit more there, Tinley, I would like to know, were you really shocked when you got into practice to see how different it was from the way your education was? Did you have that reality shock? And did you did you kind of think, yeah, education was basically a fairy tale compared to this?
I did, and I just want to preface, I went to a great nursing school, and I talk about this in the book, where I just felt so poured into by my professors, and to this day I'm still friends with some of them. And it was actually one of my professors who was the first person that I reached out to when I just was like so crying and upset my first year as a nurse. But so I just want to preface it that way. But I think that I'm not a parent, but a couple nurses that are parents did say this to me. It's kind of like parenthood. You don't know until you get there. You don't know until you have the kid, and you don't know until you're a nurse, and then you're kind of like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? And that kind of scary feeling. So it definitely is very discombobulating. And I think the fact that Kramer and Dutcher, the two leading nurse researchers on this topic, both talk about it being a shock like experience where you are going through just chaos within yourself, like emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and professionally. Because I think nursing, it does become much more of than a profession. If you let it, it will take over your life if you let it. So you really have to be careful. And so I think naming the realities, I think does go a long way. I had one nursing student that graduated, and she's like, you know what, like after like reading some of your books, she's like, I'm not scared. I'm not scared to be a new nurse. I do feel more prepared. I'm glad I know what's coming, because I think a lot of us, we get there and we're like, yay, nursing, and then we're like, hit by a train. So,
I think that's a good description.
mhm.
So Cassandra did expand a little bit, and Cassandra says that it's unfair if we don't address it. She teaches in a fourth semester, and she says a lot of time it's the conversation of the ideal versus what we have in regards to resources, staffing, etc. And when you're a nursing student, you have no clue what's going on in staffing and those kind of issues, because you have your instructor there who is guarding you from that. And the first time you usually deal with it is in reality. Cassandra also says, I think it's also important to build that working relationship with students, because they will be our future peers and they will be caring for our loved ones, potentially even us one day. I think it's also very important to be accessible and be human, honest with our students about the light and the darkness of nursing. That's powerful. That is so true. Chris says, educators want to bring reality into the classroom, but how do we do it? That's a great question, Chris. I think we could really go down a rabbit hole there. I think we'll come back to that. I think that's an excellent question, and we'll come back to that.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Lisa says just culture is important for them to see, but also doing all we can as educators to prepare them for practice to minimize risks to patients. Absolutely. Okay, Chris, I think Cassandra is answering your question. We also pair a student weekly with the charge nurse to see those rules and how the charge nurse impacts the shift. So that is a great way to do that as well. Chris, I will go ahead and because I don't want to. What I'd really like to do, Chris, is delve deep into your question.
Me too.
I don't want to take up a lot of time doing that. But what I will say, Chris, I think getting them more involved in the clinical setting for sure. Let's see. Let me take getting them more involved in the clinical setting, letting them see the ugly of the clinical setting, letting them see what happens when a mistake is made, letting them see what happens when you are short staffed, or when you have a float nurse that comes to a unit and doesn't really know the unit and what to do. Don't guard them from that. Let them see it. I also would recommend simulations and case studies that bring the real world, that bring those type of contextual factors into the case study and into the simulation. That is a great way also to I have been losing words, but it's a great way to show your students, to get them involved and let them see what the real world is like. And I didn't know Keith was here, but Keith is apparently here and is replying to Mary. And he says, yes, the easiest way to grab the link. Oh, he's replying to, okay. Mary wanted to know if this was going to be recorded, and he's telling her how to get the recording. Okay, not a problem. I'll put that up, Mary, so everybody can see it there if you guys want to grab the recording. So,
and can I just answer, sorry, Chris's question really fast?
Absolutely.
So I was a clinical educator only for 2 years. So I was like a baby educator, taking nursing students to clinicals. And one semester I had students, it was right after the Redonda Vought case, and during the huge nursing strikes that were going on in California, and our hospital was like about to start shifting patients out, and the students are like, can we still come to the hospital? Like, what are we doing? And so I actually really just focused on like nursing community news. Like, I think it's really important, to talk about like patient news, like scientific discoveries, all this. But I think it's also really important to just talk about what is happening in the nursing community, and not to shy away from it, and to really to lean into it, and to let the students ask questions, because they're seeing on Instagram, like they're hearing these things. And I think sometimes, like they still are baby nurses, and it is our job to be like, okay, I'm going to help you navigate this, because these are some really intense things that are happening, and I'm going to be there for you for the new nurses. So I think just bringing it up and letting them ask questions. Yeah, and really introducing them to the nursing community too. I think not just the bad stuff, but the good stuff, the good stuff as well, like what our culture is. And
that's great advice. Thanks for sharing that, Tenley. And please keep the questions and the comments coming in chat. We are happy to address your questions and address your comments. So getting back into the book, Tenley, there were just a couple of other things that I really wanted to highlight. And one is resilience. You said that resilience isn't just a buzzword or a romanticized ideology. It is a raw and active choice. And beyond that, it is a daily lifestyle. So talk to us a little bit about how you view resilience versus how resilience is defined. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, so resilience is funny because the people that know me really well know that is just like a trigger word for me. I'm just like, the second I hear it, I'm like, like, are we talking like, what kind of resilience are we talking about? I think that really stemmed from, when I was a new nurse and people, well-intentioned, they just kept saying, you have to be resilient. And I was like, you just have to be resilient. That's how you're going to get through this. And I was like, well, I am resilient. So why is this hurting so badly? Like, why is this still so hard? Because it was kind of feeling like, we're glossing over the hard stuff and just saying, okay, you have to get up and walk again when you've just been like, stomped on in the dirt. Like there's no recovery time. And I think this sort of like, quote unquote, like resilience that is pitched to you a lot of times, not just in nursing, but in the world. So, and I think, especially when I was doing the majority of this writing, in 2019, like resilience was like the big buzzword, not just in nursing, but like everywhere. And so I just wanted to spend an entire chapter being like, we have to unpack what resilience actually is, because I think when we hang on to what like a harmful stance of resilience, we actually do more harm when we're telling someone, oh, just be resilient. You just have to be resilient. I think that's when damage comes, because I think it really kind of robs us of the human experience of, like we talked about, not being okay and being okay with that.
Yeah. Well, and to tag on to that, one of the things that I find interesting is that if you do look up resilience, it basically, it does talk about you handling basically a situation and coming out of it unscathed and unchanged.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not resilience.
Right.
There has to be change in order for you to develop resilience, right? I mean, you're not going to come out of it unscathed. You hope that the bad things that you go through in life do change you, because you want to learn from them and you want to come out a better person and a more resilient person. So you describing that in the book was just it was very powerful. It was very powerful. So I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to go back. We've got and Lisa says that's so powerful, Tenley. Thank you. I want to go back to a couple of comments. Cassandra says that she was at a conference where they discussed professional identity and how it correlates to success. What are your thoughts? Cassandra, professional identity is critical. It's vital. I'm going to say vital and use it as a vital sign. It is vital, I think, to the success of a nurse. You have to envelop the core values of being a nurse. You have to. I don't know if you've looked at Nelda Godfrey's work at all, but there are 4 pillars to professional identity. One is our ethics and our values. The other is professional comportment. So basically how we, conduct ourselves as a profession. And the other is knowledge, and the other is leadership. Those 4 pillars, if you think about that, that's what makes up a nurse. And absolutely, professional identity is critical. And we need to develop that professional identity in education for sure. Tenley, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh no, I feel like I just learned something.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look more into them too.
I want you to chime in anytime. And Chris said, I'm thinking less paperwork in the clinical setting so they have time to experience the reality. Absolutely, Chris. And if you need help with that, I have ideas for that. Keith RN has ideas for that. Cassandra says, what strategies do you feel like will work well to incorporate this into the classroom or clinical setting? Cassandra, when you say this, are you talking about professional identity, or are we talking about the book? I'm not quite sure. So just, if you'll clarify, we're going to move on and we'll clarify, and I'll keep an eye on the chat. So Tenley, I want you to share, because this goes along with resiliency. I want you to read your poem in the book entitled "This Is Where the Fire Was." And I read it and we'll discuss it a little bit. And I am going to share your graphic while you read it, if you will, please.
Great. So you want like the kind of background story too, really fast? Or?
Yeah. You read it and share whatever you want to. Share what you want, and yeah.
Sure. So like I said, I'm from Southern California, and back, I believe when it was 2017, I'm from the part of California where there was like the horrific like mudslide and debris flow after like a big wildfire. I don't know if you all remember that. And the following year, I had the opportunity to go to a trauma conference at the local hospital, and they had first responders from that incident, that tragedy, talk about what kind of happened during that time. And so that was a really powerful thing for me. And so when I now jumping to 2019, sorry, my timeline's like all over the place. Jumping to 2019, in the middle of my new grad year, it was actually the same day that I found out I had made a mistake, and I got a phone call from my manager at home, and I was like, oh man, it was that same day. So it's like a really wild time. I actually went hiking with my mom. Shout out to my mom. We went hiking up to the area where this wildfire had happened, and where you see the mud that came down through this canyon, and like washed away just houses, businesses, like crossed the 101, like our major freeway out here, like went to the ocean. Like it just was really, really devastating. And, getting to walk with her in that space, now like a year and a half, 2 years later, was really profound, because the ground, and these pictures are pictures I took from when we were hiking up there, like the ground was still black, like there was still ash, the trees were still charred, but there were these wildflowers growing, and like now water was running through the creek again. There were people rebuilding their homes, walking their dogs. There were signs for local people to come and participate in a trail cleanup that was happening, and I just was struck by this great tragedy. And I don't want to diminish that, because like there were lives that were lost during this event, but just seeing the community rally around together, I think, was something that was so beautiful. And seeing, flowers with bees buzzing. And I just was really struck just by like the entire atmosphere. And then not that much later, we were at a local restaurant celebrating a family member's birthday. And they had a cocktail on the menu, and it said, this cocktail features honey from wildflowers that grew out of this fire, bees that got their honey from these flowers. And I just started crying. And I remember my family being like, why is she crying about this? But I think that was really when I was like, that's what resilience is. I'm getting emotional. That's what resilience is it's, you're not denying the bad thing, the horrible thing that happened, but you are trying to, live your life and celebrate in a community space that is honoring to the people that have been lost, but in a way that's saying, but we are still here and we are rebuilding, and there is still joy to be found and joy to come. So shortly after that whole experience, I wrote this poem, and this is actually my favorite thing that I've probably ever written, honestly. So thank you for letting me share it, and I'll try to read it kind of quickly. So the title is "This is Where the Fire Was." This is where the fire was, where the flowers once grew and the bees used to buzz. This is where it all came down, with a crushing weight and a rushing sound, setting the garden of our hearts into a fierce blaze, turning what was once beautiful into an ashen haze. Some pains don't just etch, they cut and they carve, making us feel like our wounds won't ever heal into scars. But being resilient doesn't mean that we've never gotten hurt. It is growing from the pain and rising from the dirt. For one day, when the shock of the past has worn, we will rise from the cinder with our strength reborn, stronger this time with our hearts freshly healed, though the scars on its surface will never fully yield. Because some kinds of pain we can never forget, but we can make that pain our power and use it to live in a way that we won't regret. And through the passage of time, though it may seem daunting, the shadows and grips of our hurt will slowly become less haunting. While we can never go back or reclaim the past, devastating sorrow is not meant to last. We move on and let go, and allow the burnt matter of our hearts to regrow. We let life start anew, and with life and time, the garden of our hearts will be healed too. Though the process is never easy, and it will most likely chide, we can move forward if we want to, we just have to decide. Instead of shrinking and fading, let us be bold, let us march towards the future, whatever it holds. And someday, when we look back into our once charred hearts, the truth will ring out loudly in harmonious parts. We'll be able to proclaim and unashamedly sing, "Do you see where the flowers now thrive and the bees now buzz? This is where the fire was." And so it's something that I repeat. Thank you for letting me share that. It's something that I repeat to myself.
It's
over
beautiful.
Thank
It's beautiful.
you.
It's I read it and I had tears come to my eyes. I love it. And just remember this for you guys: being resilient doesn't mean that that we've never gotten hurt. It is growing from the pain and rising from the dirt. I love it. That's the kind of writing that you find in this book, guys. It's unbelievable. I love it. So Tenley, we're actually wrapping up. Guys, feel free to put in questions, comments. We can continue the conversation.
Thank you.
I do want to just ask you one last question, and that question is, what is your one big takeaway? What is the one thing that you want everyone to know about this book?
Yeah, thank you. Just the main takeaway is you're not alone. And whether you are a new baby nurse, like I said, crying yourself to sleep at night, or you are an experienced nurse with like years of experience and you're just feeling so burnt out and tired and like at the end of your rope, just know that you're not alone. Ask for help. The nursing community is here for you. Even if you're in a leadership position, like I know that there's other nurses around you who want to love on you. So just ask for help. Again, you're not alone. I think those are the two main takeaways. And I think we heal better when we heal together. And I just want to celebrate our community because nurses are just so amazing. So thank you so much for having me. I love getting to spend time with nurses, and I'm going to take your CEUs too. Now that I'm thinking about that, so, I'll see you there.
I appreciate you joining us, Tenley. I think your book is powerful. I think it's something that I hope we can get out there. You nurses, buy it, share it. Let me put up. I have Tenley's email. If you guys want to reach out to Tenley directly, that is her email address. If you have questions, comments, you want to know how to get her book, which by the way, it was on back order, but it is now available again. Correct, Tenley?
Yes, we are ready to go.
Yeah. So any comments or questions from the audience as we wrap up?
Please feel free to email me, even if it's just like something silly, like just feel free, 100%.
You've got a lot of hearts, and that was so beautiful. Cassandra says nursing is a team sport. Mary says wonderful reflection. Well, we will wrap this up. I want to thank you all for joining. Chris says this has been such a blessing and just what I needed today. Thank you so much for joining. I want to wrap up by saying I saw this quote in a book that I was reading, Tenley, and I immediately thought of you. The quote was, "An artist does not create beauty, he sees beauty in creation." And I thought about you because I think as a writer, you are an artist. And to me, this book that you wrote expresses the beauty of nursing and of being human. And I thank you for sharing it with all of us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Maria and Keith, for having me. It really means a lot. So yeah, thank you.
Of course. Thank you all for joining. Appreciate it. If you have any questions for me, Maria@keithrn.com. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.